Democrats and then presented. Otherwise, your chances of actually achieving something diminish greatly.
Well, there you have it. That was from the news conference yesterday. Simon Rosenberg joins me now. He's the director of the New Democrat Network and a former Clinton campaign advisor. Simon, welcome. Good to have you here.
Good to be here, Martha.
What do you think about that? You know, is that leadership? And do you think the president has shown leadership on what is and could be a real defining moment in his presidency?
So let's remember that the most substantial and detailed budget submitted by anybody in the process was submitted by the White House back at the beginning of the year. It was voted on and rejected in the Senate and the House. The House then
it was rejected almost unanimously, I think 97,
yeah, and then
right?
The House, but it was a lot of pages, lots of detail, right? So the idea that the president hasn't submitted anything is just not true, right? He submitted the most detailed budget plan of anybody in this process. The House then passed their budget plan, and I think if there wasn't the threat of the debt ceiling in August, the Senate would have passed their budget too, and we'd be having normal budget negotiations. But the president stepped in May. Look, given the threat of the debt ceiling deadline in August, we need to short-circuit this process. We've got to bring everybody together now, not go through regular order, bring the House, the Senate, and the White House together, and those negotiations started in May. So he's been showing much more leadership on this issue than normal presidents do in a normal budgetary year.
Yeah,
so I just reject the premise.
Here's the thing, Simon. There's nothing normal about this situation. And there's nothing normal about the fact that I think so many Americans are engaged in this. When you have 80% in the recent poll that we cited earlier from the Washington Post, 80% say that they are disappointed or even angry. That's how they describe themselves in terms of what kind of job these folks are doing in Washington. You know, when you look at those numbers, isn't this a moment when you look at the presidency where he could have been out in front and he could have said, look, I'm going to do something no Democrat president has ever done before. I'm going to call for spending cuts, the likes of which we haven't seen before, because I understand how dire the situation is. And I want to be the one who's remembered for having led and solved it.
I think the president, in his budget in the beginning of the year, offered substantial spending cuts. I think in the negotiations and what he has said in public, he's willing to accept spending cuts way beyond what any Democrat thought the president would accept. The sticking point here is that the Republicans are unwilling to accept any level of tax increases, and that's why this is breaking down. And I just want to say, Martha, you said something earlier, is that the reason this is not a normal year, right? The reason we're not going through a Senate budget and a House budget and then they come to reconciliation and the president gets involved is because the Republicans have chosen to threaten the full faith and credit of the United States and to say to the world that we're not going to pay our bills. So the message from the Republican Party is that, you know, we're unwilling to raise the debt ceiling, which means, I'm going to finish, which means that we're not paying our bills. The budget. 300 days. Congress's main job, their main responsibility is to produce the budget. They couldn't do it for 300 days. We have a 14.3, 14.5 debt in this, $1 trillion debt in this country. It's astronomical. So to say that, you know, oh, well, they just didn't get around to it for a really long time, people are sick of that answer. No, I'm talking about this year. We're talking about what happened this year.
Is that
last year, the budget negotiations started in May, right? I mean, the President, the House, and the Senate, the President convened everybody early, much earlier than normal, in order to try to get this done by the August deadline the Republicans have set. This August deadline is an artificial deadline. It's an artificial deadline. The President's worked hard to try to honor the Republicans' request to get this done by August.
Well, his Treasury
We're not
Secretary
there.
said it
Let's
wasn't
hope
an
it gets done
deadline.
in the next 2 weeks.
And the fact remains that when people look back on this moment, when it comes to election time, they're going to think about this. They're going to think about whether or not they feel that the President, you know, was in front of it and handled the situation well, and we'll see what they'll decide. Simon,
well, Mother, you saw the Washington Post ABC poll today that shows that the country is much more happy with where the President is on this than the Republicans in Congress, and that was clear and definitive.
And all their numbers all across the board, which we showed earlier, are pretty bad.
No
Simon,
doubt about that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.
Good to see you as always.